Chesapeake's strategic anchors is to be fiscally responsible and sustainable, and a big part of that is having a solid budget. So today, we're going to talk with Budget Director Jonathan Hobbs about how all that comes together. Thanks for being here, Jonathan.
Sure, thanks, Liz. Glad to be here.
So Chesapeake has what, compared to my personal household budget, is quite a large budget. We're talking about more than $1 billion that we have to deal with.
Yes, that's correct.
Let's really start breaking it down, because there are a lot of ways that we kind of cut and move into different buckets, starting with the schools.
Sure.
How does that process work with knowing what the schools get versus what the city gets?
Sure. So the schools will actually send over to us the superintendent's proposed budget. That is their budget request to the city in the state of Virginia. The city council is responsible for all appropriations of school funding. So the schools cannot spend any funding without it being first appropriated by city council. And that request first starts with us sending them our estimate of the revenue sharing formula dollars. We have an agreement, or really a practice with the schools where they receive a portion of city tax dollars that we send to them for the purposes of helping them resource their budget. They also receive funding from the state, a significant amount of funding from the state, sales tax and other types of funding through the state budget. And then they also receive some federal funding, some revenue that they generate from various activities, and they utilize all of that for their budget, and they send that request over to us. It's roughly right now about 45% of our general fund dollars that go to the schools, and then the rest is obviously on the city side.
Okay. No, you mentioned general fund. How does that include operating budget and capital budget, or how does that separation happen?
Sure. So the general fund is only on the operating budget side. So I appreciate the fact that you recognize the distinction there. The capital budget has its own funds, and I certainly don't think we want to get into accounting, but that's kind of the distinction there. The general fund is the main general government fund for the operating budget, and then we have a general government capital projects fund that sort of serves the same purpose for the capital improvement program, the 5-year CIP.
Okay. What's the reasoning behind having to have the two separate budgets, the capital and operating? Why
Sure. So your operating budget is more of your ongoing operating expenditures, your personnel, and that is funded with current revenues. On the capital side of the house, these are typically much larger projects that are going to take a number of years to accomplish. The building of a school or a new roadway. That's certainly not something that's going to be accomplished within a 12-month period. So the purpose of the capital program is more for those large projects that take a number of years. But we also fund things like facility maintenance, large-scale facility maintenance out of the capital budget. And some of those projects can be a very short period of time, but again, it allows us to accumulate funds in the capital budget so that if we have a project that exceeds 1 year's worth of resources, we can accumulate that funding and then accomplish that project.
Okay, interesting. We're talking a lot about the different ways that we can use this money, but how do we even know how much money we have to work with?
Sure, so that's a great question. Fortunately for us, the largest source of revenue that we have is through the real estate tax, and we receive assessment projections from our real estate assessor, Greg Daniels. We work very closely with Greg in his office, and I actually have an economist on staff in the budget office, and she works directly with him and his staff. Wow. He sends us those projections, and then from those projections, we have a model that we run the assessment projections through, and can develop our real estate estimates for revenue for a coming fiscal year. And we typically do that based on current policy. Right now, the tax rate is $1.01. City Council in the most recent budget reduced the real estate tax rate by 4 cents. So 1 cent of that is for mosquito control, and the other dollar is kind of the general tax rate for the city. And then another large portion of our revenue comes from personal property tax on vehicles. And those assessments come to us from the Commissioner of the Revenue's office. So two of our very large sources of revenue, we receive projections of assessments from those two offices, and that's how we develop those revenue estimates. The rest of it is really done based on historical averages, historical norms, what's going on in the economy. And COVID really made that difficult a couple of years ago. That's when I first kind of got here. And, we normally would project revenue based off of history and what's going on in the economy. And it was such an uncertain time, we really didn't know how to approach those. So that made projecting revenue very difficult. But luckily, in both years, we over-realized revenue more than what we had estimated. So that funding was then made available in the capital program in subsequent years. So.
Okay. You mentioned city council, and they, if I understand it correctly, really kind of set the stage for all of the quote unquote rules of how we're budgeting, right? Like,
sure.
What role does city council play in this process?
Sure. So the most significant role that they play is they really begin the process. They tell us what we're shooting at. They are the ones that develop those strategic anchors and those 5 desired outcomes that we have. And really all the budget is doing is we are trying to resource the programs and services and projects in order to achieve those 5 desired outcomes. Council tells us what they want to achieve, and then the professional staff's responsibility is to develop programs and services and projects again to achieve those outcomes. And that's really that's the main focus of what it is we're trying to do, is align resources with those 5 desired outcomes.
Okay. So we kind of started out talking about a more than $1 billion. That can sound very overwhelming to someone trying to understand the process.
Sure.
You guys have done a lot of work in the past few years at making the actual budget document, the big book, the budget book, more understandable to the average person. Talk to me a bit about why that's important and kind of your process for that.
Sure, and I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned that. We've really done kind of a makeover, and as we're preparing the FY25 budget, that makeover is going to continue. We're going to try to do some things that are a little more aesthetically pleasing, but certainly, yes, the budget can be a very complex document. The operating budget is about 400 pages. The capital improvement program is also about 400 pages. And people do have a tendency to, look at it and maybe get a little overwhelmed or intimidated. And you're right, what we've tried to do is to break it down into manageable pieces and parts that people can easily read and understand and digest. And again, it's about the thing that we're really focused on in those documents is making sure that we're aligning those 5 desired outcomes with the resources. So whenever you see information in the budget about a resource or a request or something that we funded, hopefully you will always see that we've tied it to the desired outcome and told you a little bit about how that service or that program that we're funding is achieving that outcome.
Okay. This whole process is ongoing, right? I mean, your department doesn't shut down for any period of time during the year.
We do not.
And it seems like at any point in the year, too, that we could encourage citizen involvement in one way or another, whether that be talking to the department heads about, what's important in your area, or most especially speaking to your council members.
Sure.
So that can help them set the stage for the next budget year.
Exactly.
Talk to me about the other people who are involved in this process, right? It is not done in a vacuum. It seems like every single department plays a role. Who else is involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And people think there's a misconception sometimes that the budget office writes the entire budget, and we really don't. We run a process. That's what we do. We run 2 processes: the operating budget process and the capital process. And it really starts in August. And we send out instructions on how we want departments to submit their operating and capital budgets. And then we really turn it over to the departments and allow them to review their programs, review their services, make any adjustments, tell us what they need in terms of additional resources. Is there something that they're doing today that they feel like just isn't achieving the mark and not achieving those desired outcomes? Should they stop doing that thing? So there's an opportunity for them to review current programs and services, but also to ask if they feel like there's something that they need to add to their budget in order to better align with those outcomes. And obviously the world's constantly evolving. There's new mandates that occur, things that the state requires of us, things that the federal government requires of us, and things that our citizens ask us for. So departments really take that input in and use that when they are developing their budget requests. So yeah, a lot of the process is in the hands of the departments. And then ultimately they will submit that budget to us. My staff will review those requests. And in the January timeframe, we will meet with the Budget Review Committee, which is made up of the city manager, the deputy city managers, myself, the Human Resources Director, and we'll take a look at those requests. And again, what we're doing, and I hate to keep repeating this, but it's true, is what we're looking for is alignment with those desired outcomes, to make sure that the thing that they are requesting achieves one of those outcomes. And very specifically, they tell us how it achieves that outcome, not just that it does achieve the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's important to us to make sure that they're articulating that and we can understand it and justify including it in the budget that we're ultimately going to present to City Council this year on March 26th.
March 26th in 2024. Jonathan, we're going to send folks to your website, citychesapeake.net/budget. So that they can take a look at the current budget, future budget. Once it's up there, that'll be the place to go for folks. Did we forget anything about the budget process? Anything else you want to mention?
Well, no, but I do want to mention one thing since you brought up the website. We have been working with trying to do some additional transparency and trying to post some budget information online. So it's not just those 400-page books that I mentioned, but there's also an opportunity to look at a program called Open Book, where you can look at the budget at the global level, or you can also drill down into departmental budgets and even look at line items. So that's an opportunity that people have to explore the budget in a different way than just simply looking at those large documents. So I'd encourage folks to take a look at that. And obviously, if they have any questions or anything doesn't quite make sense to them, certainly reach out to our office. And we're always happy to talk to citizens and to help them understand what it is we do and understand the budget, because ultimately it is their budget. It's the city's budget, and it impacts the citizens of our great city, and we're happy to aid them in any way that we can.
Jonathan Hobbs, Budget Director, thank you so much for being here and helping us break down this topic.
Thanks, Liz.